Horrified American Monsters versus Horrified Universal Studios Monsters.
Hey everybody, this is Lloyd with Just Got Played, and today we're going to take a look at Horrified versus Horrified. Okay, so what we have here are two different versions of Horrified. This is the Universal Studios Monsters version, which is the original and came out in 2020. This is Horrified American Monsters, which is the newest one, and it just came out in 2021. Okay, so what I kind of wanted to do here was take a look at what these games are and what these games aren't, and kind of compare and contrast them and give you an idea of which one you need. So first things first, both versions of Horrified are 1 to 5 player co-ops where the players are investigators going around trying to save a village or a town from a bunch of rampaging monsters. Okay, and they do that by collecting items and going and solving monster riddles or puzzles, or tracking the monster down by using the items. Okay, so each monster in the game has its own little mini game, and how you combine those monsters can give you a very different gaming experience. So you can play with 1, 2, 3 monsters at a time and mix and match those to really liven things up or make things more difficult or easier. And the big difference between the two right out of the gate is the theming. This one is using classic Universal Studios monsters like, Dracula and the Mummy and a werewolf. And this one is using cryptids like Bigfoot and Chupacabra and Mothman. Okay. So I wanted to cover first what these games aren't. Okay, so what they aren't is they aren't compatible. You can't take elements from this game and mix them with this game and vice versa. Okay, what it also isn't is this is not an expansion to this game, right? So you can buy Horrified American Monsters and you don't need to have the original Horrified, or vice versa. The other thing these games are not is they are not reskins. I've been hearing that a lot. Horrified American Monsters is not a reskin of the original Horrified. If you want to use a comparison, it's similar to how Pandemic has multiple versions of Pandemics, like Reign of Cthulhu or Fall of Rome, where they're all using the same system, the Pandemic system, but they mix things up, and they mix up the theming, and they mix up the actual mechanisms in the game to give you a different gaming experience using a familiar system. Horrified does a similar thing. The differences aren't as drastic, right? The same system is there. You move around the town, spaces on the board. You're going to collect different items of 3 different colors, and then you're going to take those items to different places to do different things. Okay? Where the game really shines are the individual monster mechanics. Each monster has its own player board with its own set of rules and its own mini game that you need to solve in order to defeat the monster. So, for instance, in the original Horrified, to defeat Dracula, you have to go first destroy 4 of Dracula's coffins by using red item types of a certain strength at certain spots on the board. And once you've gotten rid of all of his coffins, all of his hiding places, you can then go directly and attack him. Okay. So that's pretty much how the game works. Move around, collect stuff, go to different places, and try to solve the mini games in order to defeat the monsters. Okay. So each monster is different. And the reason why I say this game is not a reskin is because all of the monsters in here are unique to all the monsters in here, right? There's nothing duplicated. There may be some similar mechanisms, but that's only because you're doing the same base system, which is collecting items and then taking them somewhere. Okay, so now we've gone over what this game is. It's a co-op where you're fighting monsters. And what it isn't. It's not a reskin, it's not a expansion, and it is not compatible. So now we're at the point to decide, well, which version of this game do I need? Which one do I want? do I need them both? As you can see, I own them both, mainly because I really like the theming on it. I like co-ops. But when you get right down to what the differences are, the monsters in the original Horrified are a little bit more straightforward and simplistic. So what does that mean? A lot of the monsters in here are very straightforward in that you're going to go around the board, pick up some items, take them to a place, and then kind of drop them off. All right. Most of them work in a similar manner. You're going to get a bunch of items, go to a place, and then drop them off. The game doesn't really fight back that much against you. Some of the monsters are going to mark you and they're going to move towards you and damage you, but they don't actively work against you on the puzzles. The mummy does kind of mix up some tiles here and there, and the creature from the Black Lagoon will set you back. But most of them don't really negate what you're doing, and they're pretty straightforward. The monsters in Horrified American Monsters are a little bit trickier. The Jersey Devil, for example, drastically changes up how the game works because you take out almost half the deck with all those citizen cards, and those are out of the game deck. So it's up to the players to decide when they want to spawn those characters or the citizens and slow the game down some. And the way that puzzle works, you have a certain amount of clues, and as the game progresses, the Jersey Devil will sabotage some of those clues, and you may have had 2 of 3 clues, and then it replaces one of the ones that you knew with now one that you don't know. So that's just one of the monsters in there. Bigfoot kind of does something similar where he will, you're doing a puzzle and he will flip pieces of his puzzle back over, which means you have to then go and get, more parts, more items to flip those puzzle pieces back over. So all of the monsters in Horrified American Monsters are a little bit more tricky, for lack of a better term. They have a little bit more going on, and they are a little bit harder, I think, to defeat. So what does that mean in terms of gameplay and your game group? Well, the original Horrified, I think, is a more casual, family-friendly game. So if you don't have, a lot of gamer friends and you want to introduce them to something that's a little bit lighter than your standard fare, but is also, a modern board game, I think Horrified, the Universal Studios Monsters, is a good start, right? It also will work better with younger players because the monsters are a little bit more straightforward with their puzzles, and there's not as much trickiness to how the monsters operate. So Horrified American Monsters is a little bit trickier. It's a little bit more in depth. So I think this one, even though it's not a massive step up, I think this one is going to be for more of a gamer group, someone who's used to playing more modern board games. So if you have Horrified and you've already played it to death and you want a new challenge, Horrified is a completely different experience with different puzzles, and it will put a fresh spin on the game because those monsters do make the way the game operates feel different. So overall, I think more family friendly, more casual friendly, a little bit more of a challenge here in American Monsters. And I own them both. I think they're both great. I really like them. They're quick. You can play them solo. You can get them to the table. They don't take long to set up. They don't, take long to explain the rules. And they are very friendly overall. You're not gonna die and be out of the game. You can talk amongst each other to try and help figure out what the best strategy is. So it is a very friendly game overall in the Horrified game system. So if you're looking at component quality to kind of determine, which one's the bigger, bang for the buck, I do think across the board, the components are serviceable. The cards in both games are very flimsy and they feel very cheap. But because you're not, doing a whole lot with the cards, you're just flipping them and looking at them. You're not shuffling them. You're not really holding them in your hand too much. I think that's fine. The game board itself in both versions is very nice. It's a very sturdy game board. It's got nice art on it. I do like the art in Horrified a little bit. Horrified American Monsters a little bit more than the Universal Studios Monsters version. And I do like the card art better overall in the American Monsters. But the one big difference between the two games and component quality is the miniatures. The miniatures in Horrified Universal Studios Monsters are noticeably cheaper than they are in American Monsters. The little miniatures of the Wolfman and, the Bride of Frankenstein and Dracula are all very soft in feel and in detail. So what I mean by soft in detail is that when you look at them, the details don't pop out at you. They're very smooth overall. There's not a lot of sculpting. There's not a lot of detail in the figure. If you compare like the Bigfoot and the Ozark Howler to, say, the Wolfman, since they're both furry, you can see a noticeable difference. Overall, these miniatures in the American Monsters actually feel like they're made of a harder plastic versus what's in Horrified. They're very soft and bendy. That being said, I do think the miniatures in here are serviceable. I painted mine. I did have some problems with the paint sticking to them, so that might have just been I didn't clean them well enough beforehand. But I've never had that issue with any of the other miniatures I've ever done. And I haven't painted the American Monsters versions yet, so I might have the same issues. But I do feel that the component quality on the miniatures was a little bit substandard in the first Horrified versus American Monsters. So overall, that's my take. And I think if you own one or the other, that's great because they're both great games. If you own both, even better. You can switch up your play style, switch up who you want to play with, who you want to play against. Overall, I think they're both really fun games. And if you've played them both, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you thought about both versions. Which one's your favorite? As always, like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us out. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.